Okay. Good afternoon. Today is the 26th of May in the year 2010. I'm Darrell Peterson, a volunteer at the Palm Springs Air Museum here in California. Part of our mission is to record and preserve the history of our nation's military conflicts, especially World War II. As part of the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., we conduct interviews with veterans and other civilians who participated in those conflicts. Today I'm here at the museum along with Rita Galter, and today we have the honor and privilege of interviewing First Lieutenant Irwin Galter. We're going to talk to him about his experiences during World War II as in B-24 in the Pacific and other information. It's nice to have you here, Irwin. And we'd like to start out by having you state your full name and spell it out, and then tell us where and when you were born.
Okay. My name is Irwin Burton Galter. I was born in Chicago, Illinois, February 25th, 1924, in the Michael Reese Hospital, where about 4 years later my wife was born, also in the same hospital. I went to Chicago schools. The first grade school I went to was the Blaine School, and then from there to Lemoyne School, and then to Lakeview High School.
What part of Chicago?
These are all on the north side of Chicago.
Okay.
The war, well, then I went to Wright Junior College for about a year and a half, and then World War II had broken out, and I enlisted in the Air Force. The Air Corps is what it was called then.
Okay.
And
let me cover a little bit more before we get to that part of you were living in the city, and
yes.
did in school, what subjects were you interested in? And
In the grade school, of course, we didn't have any choice, really. There was a standard curriculum. When we got to high school, I took more math and science, and a little bit of that, in preparation to go to engineering school.
Okay, so were you interested in aviation part of it, or just being engineer?
No, just being an engineer.
Okay.
I wasn't even too sure what branch of engineering I would go into.
Mm-hmm.
But I went to Wright Junior College, and Wright College was, at that time, a very good school. I don't know what it's like now. It might still be very good. But this was back in the very early 40s. I think it was about 1941 that I went there. And most of the faculty were really fine professors.
Mm-hmm.
Because they couldn't get jobs at these big universities. They could get a job wherever they could, and Chicago, the city of Chicago, was lucky enough to corral them. And we had just a wonderful set of instructors at Wright Junior College at that time. And then I remember, I guess I'll go back a little bit.
Yeah, I'd like to hear a bit about your parents and
Okay.
where they came from and so on.
Okay. Just a little flavor of old Chicago when I was a youngster.
Okay.
All the automobiles, there weren't too many of them, but they were black.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a little shaver, 3 or 4 years old, and I got to learn the names of the automobiles. And my dad had a radio store in Chicago. He sold radios, which were very new at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And he sold musical instruments. I still have a ukulele from his store.
Oh, great.
And I remember people were not familiar with these real technological advancements like the radio. and a lady bought a radio from him. And a couple days later, she called him up and she said, "It doesn't work." I said, "I don't know what's wrong with it. It doesn't work." So he went over to her house, and he noticed that it wasn't plugged in. and he's told her something I remember to this day. He said, "For nothing you get nothing."
Right, this newfangled electricity thing.
Yeah. And I remember when refrigerators first came out, and the apartment buildings had a little blue signs on the side that said Frigidaire. That was a big attraction. And there were still quite a few horses on the street. We had horse-drawn ice wagons, horse-drawn garbage wagons. We had fruit vendors that had horses. All the milk wagons were horse-drawn. And then there were the rag pickers, and they would have horse-drawn wagons, and they would collect old clothes. And so we had the tail end of the horse generation and the start of the automotive.
So did the Depression affect your family?
Yes, my dad had this radio store, and he was doing quite well. I guess he must have started it about 1928, and then he had it through 1929, and then he lost it during the Depression, I think about 1930. And this was unfortunate, but that's how things were.
So what did he do then?
He then sold radios, portable radios. They called them portables then. Those are those ones that were built like that and had this
as opposed to the console.
Yeah, and he used to sell them. He sold them to grocery markets, a lot of them.
So he was selling to retail stores, not door to door.
Yeah, they had no music in their stores at that time, and he sold them these radios, and they went for it. So we managed to survive on these kinds of sales. And
how about your mother? She was stay-at-home?
My mother was very, very interestingly, neither of them were well educated. My grandfather died from a burst appendix when my father was only 12 years old. And he was the oldest boy in the family, and he had 4 siblings and his mother to take care of. So he couldn't continue with school. He dropped. Well, he finished grade school. That was it. My mother, her family wasn't well off either, but she managed to finish 1 year of high school, and she apparently was pretty good at algebra, because many years later she helped me with my algebra homework when I was in high school, and she was right on. It was terrific.
Great.
My father was born in the Ukraine, and his family came here when my father was, I think, was about 9 years old. My mother was born in Chicago, and
where was her family?
Her family was originally from, I think it was, for a long time I thought it was Poland, but looking back at the records, I think it was Lithuania.
Oh, okay.
And they were not well off either. And my mother used to tell the story about how when she and her sister, her younger sister, had to go to the bathroom, and it was down the hall from this tenement-type building that they lived in. And one of the sisters would chase the rats away while the other one used the stools. And that's how bad it was. But,
different world. Why did you know why they came to the U.S. or?
Yeah, it was first of all opportunity, because there was no opportunity in Eastern Europe.
Right.
And it was riots, racial riots type of thing. And I remember my father telling me that his father, my grandfather, used to play chess with a Eastern Orthodox priest in Ukraine. He was the neighbor about a mile away. The next farm, they were farmers. And one day the priest told him, he said, I heard in the church that there was going to be a pogrom It's a race riot kind of thing in Ukraine, primarily against Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the perpetrators were Cossacks. And so my grandfather took the family and they went to my great-grandfather's farm, which was a distance away from the other farms. And they were safe. And then he came back to my grandfather's farm and they found out that the pogrom had started and ended before it got that far, geographically.
So that was in the reason also to leave the area.
Yes, yes. He had, my grandfather had to bribe the train people so he could get the family on the train. And this happened a number of times as they crossed Europe. I think they ended up in Germany, and then they went to England and took a steamer from, I think it was Liverpool, to the United States,
Mm-hmm.
through Ellis Island.
So did you have any religious training when you were growing up then, or?
No, I always, well, I went to Sunday school a little bit, but I was never that interested.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I was too Americanized.
All right.
And so religion at that point was never a big deal with me. That changed later on.
Okay.
So that gives you a little flavor of my family and Chicago way back in those days. On my 25th, on the 25th of February, on my birthday, my 19th birthday, I had previously enlisted, but they called me up on that day, right on my birthday. And I remember my parents and my sister and my mother drove me down to the reception center in almost downtown Chicago, and left me there. And I remember there were a bunch of other guys there, and we were...
What year was that then?
That was in 1942.
Okay, so it was after Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe it was 43. I think it was 43.
Okay.
Then I remember the first Army meal I got. That was spaghetti. Real fine stuff. Anyway, and then that night, they put us on a troop train. We thought we were real important. You know, we're now troops, and they put us on this troop train. And it took forever to get out of the station in Chicago. I forgot which station it was. And finally we left. It was, must have been 10, 11 o'clock at night, and the train finally pulled out of the station. And we traveled across Illinois and Iowa overnight. And the next morning we found ourselves in Kansas. And we're approaching the town of Hutchinson, Kansas. And there was a railroad platform there. And we're wheat fields as far as you could see, and nothing else, and flat land. And there was one guy standing on the platform. One guy. And he's waiting for our train. And so he boarded the train, and from then on he was called Kansas. Everybody referred to him as Kansas.
Okay.
The rest of us were from the Midwest.
Yeah.
I guess Kansas is part of the Midwest too, but further west.
So before you enlisted, though, you were in college?
I was at Wright Junior College,
Okay.
taking pre-engineering.
All right. So you quit school in order to join up? Is that?
Oh, I joined up first while I was still going to school. And then when they called me up, which was in the following February, of course I left school.
Okay. So do you remember where you were and what was going on Pearl Harbor on that
Oh, yeah.
December
Yeah,
7th?
I certainly do. It was on a Sunday, December 7th.
Right.
And we were all gathered, my family, my sister, my mother, my father, and myself, in the living room. And we had a majestic console radio.
Mhm.
And we had it turned on to the news broadcast, and we heard about Pearl Harbor at that time. And it was a rather unbelievable situation, something that was a little hard to comprehend.
All right. No
And-
pictures back then.
And then the news kept pouring in about how the news got worse as the reports of the sinking of the battleships and all the other ships and bombing of the barracks. It was Hickman Field and I forgot the name
Hickam. Hickam
of
Field.
it. Hickam
right,
Field, yeah. And I forgot the name of the barracks that were bombed.
Yeah, I don't remember right now either.
But so at that time, and from then on, the country rallied, and as opposed to what the situation is today, we were very unified.
Right.
Once Pearl Harbor happened, everybody got behind it, behind the effort, the war effort, and it was like one big family
Yeah.
fighting off the
Right.
enemy.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I had a sister, but she was younger,
Oh, okay.
and when I was overseas, she went to college,
Oh, okay.
but she had never served in the armed services.
Okay, so we're on the train through Kansas now.
Yeah.
Where were you headed? To California? or-
We were headed to California. We weren't sure where we were going. I don't think they ever told us. But
So at this time, did you know you were going to be in the Army Air Force, or
yeah, I had
you just-
enlisted in the Air Force.
Okay.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, right after I enlisted, I said to my father, I said, I've never been up in an airplane. I think maybe we ought to go down to Midway Airport and go up on one of these 15-minute rides. At least I'll get to feel what it's like.
Barnstormers.
So we did. We went down to Midway Field, and we went up for 15 minutes or so, and spun around the field and so on, and landed. I don't know if I was too happy about my decision at that point. This was a small plane, kind of bounced around a little bit. But that was interesting. The reason I went into the Air Force, I really had a greater inclination to be a diver in the Navy.
Oh,
Because,
SEALs, I guess those
well, I don't know
became.
what
They
were
didn't
called
call them
then, they were
those.
just called
yeah,
divers.
Mhm.
Because being in Chicago and living not far from Lake Michigan, I spent many, many days on a place called the Rocks in Lake Michigan. It was between Belmont Harbor and Montrose Beach, and it was like a breakwater, and it had rocks behind it. And you used to be able to dive off into about 10 feet of water right at the edge there, and it was great for swimming. You didn't have to walk through the sand or anything like that. It was great. And at one point, one of the fellas, one of my friends, decided we ought to build a diving helmet. And so what we did is we got an old thrown out water heater, and we sawed it in half.
Mhm.
And then we sawed room for the shoulders, and put garden hose insulators on the raw metal so it wouldn't cut into our shoulders.
Yeah.
And then we sawed off a window area, and we got some heavy plastic and some copper stripping and the rivets and stuff, and we managed to get that faceplate riveted on. And then in order to get enough weight on it so we could actually go down underwater, we had to have lead weights.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a hold of a couple of bread pans and filled them with lead.
Yeah.
That's when lead didn't have the bad name it's got
Right.
now, and all
Play
the kids
with
would melt lead and make little toy soldiers out of that.
Yeah.
I had one of those sets once. But anyway, we filled these bread pans with lead, and then we fastened them on, one in the front and one in the back of the helmet. And then at the top, where the water, where the water entry was when it was a water heater,
Mm-hmm.
we attached a garden hose, clamped it on there, and then at the other end of the garden hose, about 20 feet or 25 feet of it, was a hand pump, a tire pump. So
Okay, this sounds risky.
so we went down in it, and I remember one fellow, he said he was going to set a record, time record, how long you could stay underwater in this thing. So he went down, he sat on the bottom of Lake Michigan, it was about 12 feet of water, and we're pumping away at the top. and it used to sound when it came in that water heater cavity, it went like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, while we're pumping away, and he's down there for about 10 minutes or so, the pump fell apart.
Uh-oh.
It didn't work, so we took it apart. We took the pump apart, then reassembled it, and started pumping again, but it took a while to do this.
Yeah.
And he's sitting on the bottom of the lake.
Uh-oh.
So we finally, he was down there for about 20 minutes total, and we pulled him up with a rope. There was a rope attached to the helmet also.
Okay,
So jokingly, when he got up, we said, "Oh, how was the air?" And he said, "Well, it's pretty good, except that the water started to come up pretty high."
That was a sign that things were
Yeah,
being
the
pumped.
air pressure wasn't there anymore.
Yeah.
But anyway, with more air, it blew it out the bottom.
Ah.
And I remember one of the news companies found out about this, and so they came down and they photographed us, and we ended up in the newspaper. It was a Chicago American at the time.
Uh-huh.
The four of us, there were four of us. But anyway, that was my inclination. I wanted to be a diver in the Navy, but the Navy wasn't offering any commissions for that.
Okay.
And the Air Force said, well, if you get through Air Force training, you can get to be a commissioned officer. So that sounded like a better deal.
Yeah,
So
right.
that's how I got in the Air Force.
Okay.
On that train, we went towards California. We got into California, and I remember those are the old steam locomotives,
Mm-hmm.
and they had to stop every now and then and take on more water so that they could generate steam and continue on.
Right.
And I remember this one water stop, and it was the most desolate, hot place I had ever been. And
Is it Palm
it was-
Springs?
no, it wasn't quite Palm Springs, but not far away. It was in Barstow.
Okay.
Barstow. And there were just a couple of little buildings off in the distance, and the heat waves were coming up off the ground. And finally we saw the water being pumped or dropped into the boiler of the locomotive. I couldn't figure out how anybody could live out here. Anyway, then we proceeded to Fresno, California.
Okay.
And this place that we went to, at that time, was called Fresno Army Air Base. It had no airplanes.
Mm.
It was a basic training.
Ground
Yeah.
school.
Yeah, and it was, I remember the barracks were single-story barracks, tar paper covered barracks. And we went through they put us on buses, and they put us, and we went to the air base in the bus after we got off the train. And I remember as we entered the base, there were a bunch of guys waiting at the entrance and yelling, "You'll be sorry, you'll be sorry." And we could tell that they were new recruits because their clothes looked like they just came out of the supply room. And the biggest giveaway was their boots, which were very clean. And so they'd probably been there a day or two before. So that was our greeting at Fresno, our air base.
Got something to worry about
Yeah.
now.
So in the next couple of days, we got issued our uniforms. And we all got our green fatigue suits and our olive drab dress uniform.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, either they ran out of my size for what they call the blouse, the top part of your uniform, and they gave me a blouse I could have sworn was from World War I. And when the other guys saw this, they were laughing like hell, you know, because I looked different than anybody else. Anyway, I remember when we first got there, they told us that we would be quarantined to base for 2 weeks. We wouldn't be allowed off the base. And I remember that first Saturday, after we'd been there for a week, we'd been tramping around close order drill for 8 hours a day in the mud. This was the rainy season in California. We had a song. We used to sing a lot, you know.
So this was in February?
This was in, it was probably by that time either the very end of February or the first part of March.
Okay, yeah. So it's before the hot season.
Yeah, it was the rainy season, and the drill field was muddy.
Mm.
And so we used to sing songs as we marched, and of course it was always Inky Dinky Parlez-vous, California's a hell of a state, the asshole of the 48. That's how we went.
There's always a little bit rowdy lyrics.
Yeah,
So,
a little bit raunchy.
Right.
But anyway, I remember that first Saturday, and we were still restricted to base. And I'm sitting on the front steps, the wooden steps of the barracks, and I looked up behind the barracks, and there's this about a 9-foot high chain link fence. And on the top, on braces that were facing in, were 4 strings of barbed wire.
Mm-hmm.
And they were facing in, to keep us in, not to keep people out.
Right.
And I looked at that, and symbolically, that was quite an instance in my life that I never forgot. I saw the chain link fence and the barbed wire. I'm in my yard suit, which wasn't orange, but it was green.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same coverall type of thing, and it registered. Anyway, after we finished with our training at Fresno, I don't know if you want to go through all the different training.
Yeah, just highlight and any special.
We went to the next place was really great. It was University of Nevada in Reno.
Okay.
And that was kind of a holding place until there was space to go to the next to pre-flight. And so I was at University of Nevada for 2 months. And
so this was all ground school, airplane operations?
Well,
kind
it
of
wasn't
stuff?
really. It was more the kind of stuff that universities teach. They have mathematics and that kind of stuff.
Basics.
Yeah. It was a way to finance the universities, I think, in those days, because all their students were off to war.
Yeah.
But it was a very pleasant, wonderful experience. The University of Nevada at that time had beautiful lawns, thick grass, that thick, and the buildings were red brick, trimmed in white, and it was, in fact, it was so beautiful that one of the movie companies filmed the film Andy Hardy Goes to College at the University of Nevada campus.
No.
He was supposed to, in the story, be at a Midwestern university, but here it was up in Reno.
Yeah.
but that's the kind of place it was. Many years later, after the war, I went back there and I was just totally devastated because they didn't increase the amount of land given to the university, but they had built all kinds of buildings on it. The lawns were almost disappeared, and there was graffiti in the football field. It used to be, the football field was down a hill, and on the side of the hill were seats, and on top were this like Roman colonnades,
Mm-hmm.
and white, beautiful. The whole thing was this pristine. And when I went there after the war, many years after the war, it was graffiti all over these columns,
Yeah.
beautiful white columns.
Awful.
Anyway, from University of Nevada, we went to a pre-flight at Santa Ana Army Air Base
Okay.
in, I guess, what is now Costa Mesa,
Okay.
California. And we were there, I don't know, a couple of months or so. And I remember that on payday, they took out, I think it was about either $5 or $10 out of our pay. And we were getting, I think, $75 a month at that time. And so they took either $5 or $10 out. And they took it out for grass seed. And we looked around, and there wasn't any grass. There wasn't any grass anywhere. Well, this was a scam. And it was perpetrated by the commanding officer at Santa Ana. The government found out about it, the higher-ups in the Air Force, and they dropped his rank and took him out of there. And they took some of his staff also, salted them away.
Wow.
Well, that was a scam. And but anyway, from Santa Ana, the best thing about Santa Ana is we got in pretty good shape.
Okay.
A lot of PE. We were climbing ropes and doing push-ups and running around, and we were really in much better shape after we left there after the
So,
3 months or so.
Did you get any flying at this point?
No,
or-
there's still no airplanes.
Still no airplanes in
Still
sight. Okay.
grounded. And then we were sent to Thunderbird Field near Phoenix, Arizona. And I went to pre-flight there. And somehow I got through pre-flight. I was one of the last to solo, but I
Oh,
managed
really?
to solo. We were flying Stearmans.
Okay.
And we had, I had to do, you know, the slow rolls and the snap rolls and the Immelmans and the tail spins and all kinds
All
of
the
stuff.
fun stuff.
All the fun stuff. And I remember I was up on a check flight once, and this big, heavy check flight instructor, he sat in the front seat. I was in the back seat of this Stearman biplane. This guy was real heavy. And generally, you know, when I was soloing, of course, I was the only one in the plane, and it whipped around pretty well.
Yeah.
But when this guy was sitting up and I had to do a slow roll, I had all to do was to roll the plane over. It was a hell of a job. He was a real anchor on the front. Anyway, I got through flight, pre-flight, or from primary, and they sent us to basic flight school in Pecos, Texas. And I didn't do too well there. It was no longer a biplane, so I couldn't line up the wires on between the wings to line up on the horizon when I made a turn,
Oh, okay.
and that kind of thing. And it had this real big radial engine in it. I forgot the designation of the airplane, the trainer plane, but it was
Probably a
called,
T6, huh?
No, it wasn't a T6. They called it the Vultee vibrator.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a different.
This had a big engine on it, but it was underpowered. And a lot of guys were killed during training when they were going around the final leg of their landing approach. And the plane would stall out and get killed.
Yeah.
In fact, the day we arrived there at Pecos, we were all lined up at the train station, and they rolled out 2 coffins and loaded it on the train while we watched. Anyway, so I didn't last too long there. I washed out after about another 10, 12, 15 hours of flying time.
Okay.
So, I put in for navigation school, and I was accepted. And first they sent us to gunnery school in Las Vegas. I went through about 6 weeks of that, and opening or tearing the guns apart, blindfolded, and reassembling them, and shooting all kinds of targets and so on. That was more of a fun deal, especially shooting skeet off the back of a Jeep
Oh, wow.
and shotguns.
That was part of the
Yeah.
training. Yeah.
And from there, I was assigned at the Hondo Army Airfield in Texas for navigation school.
Okay.
And we had, I think those were AT-7s that we flew in primarily, a small Beech twin engine.
Mm-hmm.
And they were outfitted, so of course there were the pilot and the co-pilot, but behind the pilots there were 3 tables for the navigation students. And one of the students was designated as the lead navigator. He would do the navigating, and the other 2 students would track him. And they'd keep their records tracking where we were going. And that's how they worked that. And there was one incident. We had right in the center of the back part of the airplane, opposite the second student's table, was this thing in the roof of the airplane. And it was like a plastic dome with a flat side, like that. And mounted in this thing was something called an astral compass. And what you would do, this was during sunlight you would use this thing, and you would get a sun alignment on the sun, and using your tables, the books of tables and all, you would calculate where approximately you should set the 3 different settings on this astral compass, and then adjust the angle finally, which was the last adjustment while you were looking and trying to line it up on the sun. Well, one guy, one of the students, one day, and it was his turn to use the astral compass, but it was almost noon. And so he's feverishly figuring out all the different settings he should make on this compass. And then he'd go up to the compass, and he'd set in one setting and a setting, and then he went to do the last setting, which was this angular setting, and it would hit up against the flat part of this dome.
Oh.
It would never get beyond that, and he'd swear. And then he'd run down, he'd have to recalculate again, and he went and calculated for about 10 more minutes, got all his notes and everything, and then made his settings, and still, it was hitting that damn flat of that bubble. Tried it the 3rd time, the same thing happened. He got so angry, he took this astral compass out of his rack and threw it on the floor.
Frustration.
Yeah. Oh, that was funny. But anyway,
Did that fix it?
yeah, that fixed him, I think. But we went on. Once in a while, we got a chance to fly in. It was a Lockheed.
Yeah, just a minute.
Yeah.
Hey, that was the primary means of navigation
Well, that was
during
for
the day.
shooting the sun. It was a faster way than trying to shoot the sun with the sextant.
Okay.
We could use the sextant.
So
We
you
did
need time of day and the sun angle, and
the day,
from that
the time
you,
of day, and then they had the tables which would indicate approximately where you should kind of aim the last adjustment, which gave you finally the angle of the sun
okay.
to where you were, and from that you could work backwards and get a line of position.
So you get a longitude and a latitude?
No,
or-
you'd get a line of position, and then you would advance that line of position as you went along on your course, and take it again, and then you knew approximately what your ground speed was. You'd advance that second line up, and then you would get across a fix.
Okay, and that's on your map here.
Yeah,
You're doing
yeah,
that.
right.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
you would do is,
that's not like GPS, right?
well, even worse were the sextants.
Okay.
The sextants they gave us. I found one, a couple of years back in a antique shop up in Del Mar, and they had this wooden box, and it kind of looked familiar to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at it, and it had this sextant in it. And then when I was using the sextant in navigation school, I thought it was a pretty nice instrument. But many years later, and I saw what the thing was, it looked like a toy.
Yeah.
It was terrible. and what it had was, it had a kind of a cardboard or a paper thing that you stuck in there, and then every time you got a line up on a star, you would pull a lever down, and that would scratch a mark on this paper.
Oh,
And that's
okay.
how you marked your angles. Anyway.
That's a totally lost art.
Yeah. The best you could do, if you were really good at it, with a sextant, to get a 3-star fix. That's what you would try to do. You get stars at 3 different angles.
But that's
wide
only at
angles.
night. Right?
That's at night.
Yeah.
And you'd have to calculate all the, but after you got your shot, you had to go back and you had to calculate your line of position from the tables and everything, and where you would be on the ground if you had seen a certain such and such a star at a certain period of time at such and such an angle.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how you calculated that. A 3-star fix, which is the way you would get finally a triangle of lines of position, and you were presumably in the center of that triangle. The accuracy of that was no better than about 5 miles.
Mm.
And it took about at least 20 minutes to calculate all this stuff. I figured that wasn't too productive a way to navigate. So when I got overseas, the sextant ended up under my bed.
Oh.
And I used dead reckoning and primarily and positions of the different identifiable things on the ground or on the sea or shorelines or whatever.
Okay.
But navigation school was pretty nice, and except that we were flying in Texas, and we had these little 2-engine planes, and we flew at low altitudes, fairly low altitudes, and it was always rough.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to get airsick. And I think it was 14 or 16 weeks of navigation school. And I lost a pound a week. So by the time we got out of there, I was looking pretty good.
Okay.
Trim.
Slim and trim.
Yeah. But when we got a 1-week furlough after graduation, before we had to report to March Field in Riverside, California for overseas training. And when I got home in Chicago for that 1 week, I said, "Ma, don't invite anybody over. I just want to go down to the rocks and lie down and just flake out and recover." So a few people did show up. But we got out to March Field. That was the first time that they put the crews together. And so I met the pilot, co-pilot, and the bombardier, and the enlisted men, the gunners, the radio operator.
So was this strictly a B-24 base?
Yeah, these were B-24s.
Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the co-pilot. I won't mention his name, but he and the pilot did not get along.
Hmm.
He had not a good opinion of the pilot's capabilities, and he felt so strongly about it that he drove his little car one day and deliberately rolled it.
Hmm.
So he didn't have, so he ended up in the hospital for a while. He didn't have to fly over with this guy.
Hmm. Cool. Oh.
But I did. Anyway, so we got a new co-pilot. And we went through the training at Marchfield. And there were some exciting things that happened. The planes we flew were what we used to call war-weary B-24s.
Okay.
They had been used overseas, and then when they were replaced with newer equipment, they were sent back and used it for overseas training.
Mm-hmm.
So we were flying these war-weary B-24s, which was very exciting. The first exciting experience we had, one day we had a practice bombing mission in the desert. I guess not far from Palm Springs. It went through the pass up here, the San Bernardino Pass. I guess it went a little bit south, and that's where the bombing area was. There's a big circle in the desert.
East of the Salton Sea there. I think the bombing range is still there.
Is it? Yeah, that's about where it was. Anyway, so we dropped the bombs, and we're coming back towards Marchfield, and we're still over the desert. And we're all just sitting there, and the pilots are flying, and all of a sudden the plane goes, takes a violent dive down, and then they pulled it back up again. We wondered, what was that? Then we flew along a little further. Same thing happened, another dive, there, pulled it back. And then the pilot said, I want everybody to get back into the waist of the plane. Remove the camera hatch, which is on the floor, and left a hole in the floor about 1 yard square.
Mm-hmm.
And get ready to jump. So I'm first in line. I'm waiting over there, got my chest packed, and I'm waiting over this empty hole there, and waiting for the signal, the buzzer. It never came.
Oh.
Because the pilot, I guess he was figuring, gee, if I have these guys jump out and they find out there was really nothing wrong with the plane, I'm in trouble. And so he decided he's going to try to land the plane with everybody in it. So put the camera hatch back on, and we proceeded. And as we were approaching our landing at Marchfield, the routine at the time on a B-24 was you pulled everybody from the extremities of the plane and put them on the flight deck because it wasn't too safe in the tail gun or in the ball. At one time it was ball turrets, later it became just a belly bubble, and the nose turrets. So they took everybody out and put them on the flight deck. And I was standing between the two pilots looking out the front window.
Mm-hmm.
And we're coming down for a landing, and the plane takes another dive. And I'm looking down there, wide-eyed, I'm seeing this ground come up, and we're going down there just like a bomb. And both pilots put their feet up on the dashboard and hauled back as hard as they could on the sticks. And we just greased in.
Oh.
Just greased in.
Well,
Another 10 feet we would have had. We were just in blobs on the runway. But that was a nice experience.
Well, what was wrong? Did they ever figure it out?
They analyzed it after the plane was landed. They found out it was a trim tab that stuck in, I guess, in the L position.
Yeah. So they.
One position, whatever makes the plane go down.
Yeah, the elevator.
Yeah. The trim tab on the elevator would stick. That's what did it.
Wow.
On another day, we were flying not far from Marchfield, and we're up about 20,000 feet, which was kind of high for a B-24. After you get over 25,000 feet on B-24, it would slide all over the sky.
Was that right?
It wasn't too controllable. So they generally didn't go any higher than about 20. Ours did go any higher than about 25,000. I think we're up about 20,000 feet on this day. And one of our engines caught on fire.
Uh-oh.
So the pilot feathered the the prop, and shut off the fuel to that engine. It was still smoking, but finally the fire went out, and he had radioed into the field, and they cleared the field, had all the emergency vehicles lined up, and they said, "You got the field to yourself. Just spiral down." We were pretty high up. Spiral down and land. Well, he's spiraling, and then it got nearer to the ground. He decided that he must have had enough altitude. He'd do a standard box pattern approach to the field.
Okay.
Well, it turned out he didn't have enough thrust left, and it was either hit the whack barracks, which was dead ahead, or swerve off to the side and land in a farm field. So we landed in the farm field.
Good choice.
Yeah, good choice, and it was with the direction of the plowing, so we didn't have to go over. And we landed on that field. You never saw 10 guys get out of an airplane so fast. In about 15 seconds, we were 50 yards away. We got out. And then I guess they had to haul that plane back later on. Well, that was 2 instances. The third one happened again when we were on this practice bombing mission out at that bombing range in Southern California, out in the desert. And this time we were to be on oxygen. We were up high, we were on oxygen. Everybody's wearing an oxygen mask. And then we came towards the practice target. And I got on the bomb run. Of course, the bombardier then took over with his bomb sight, and he's guiding the plane. And we're at the point where the bombs were to be released, and they didn't drop. So we went around again.
So you had practice bombs, little?
Yeah, they were
little
kind
practice.
of like smoke bombs of some sort. They were about that big and that big around.
Oh, okay,
Like
pretty
that.
good size.
Yeah. So we went around again. We were all on oxygen, and the same thing happened. The bombs didn't release. Well, the bombardier we had and the pilot didn't get along. They didn't like each other to begin with. So the pilot's really getting steamed. And of course he's using up fuel too as he's keeping on going around. So on the third approach he had the co-pilot take over, and the pilot snapped on a 5-minute walk-around bottle, oxygen walk-around bottle. We were about that big.
Mm-hmm.
They were good for 5 minutes. In case you had an emergency, you had to go somewhere in the plane and get back. So he came down from the flight deck, and he had to crawl through the tunnel that went from the flight deck up to the nose of the plane. This was an old version of the B-24. And in that version, there was the nose gunner in his turret, and then there was the bombardier, and then behind him was the navigator, and the navigator's table was behind the navigator. And there was very little room up there. And then when the pilot arrived with his 5-minute walk-around bottle, there was no room for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I climbed up on the navigator's table, and I sat up there while the bombardier and the pilot were trying to release the bombs manually. Because they weren't doing it with the bomb sight. And there was a manual control, bomb release control. And the only way that the bombardier and the pilot could communicate was if one guy wanted to say something. He took his oxygen hose out of its connection. The pilot was the 5-minute walk-around bottle, and with the bombardier was the hose coming off the wall. And they would stick it in the other guy's ear and yell.
I never heard of that one.
So what happened was, this is if you were on oxygen, and
Yeah.
the noise of the plane and everything, that's the only way you could hear. And because the pilot had no intercom connection, being free from his position, his normal position. So these guys were getting hot and bothered over, and were fighting over this bomb release handle, and the words were flying, and the hoses were coming out of the plugs and sticking in the ears, and pulled it out, and finally the pilot's starting to turn a little blue. and he takes this hose out, and he gives it to the bombardier, and the bombardier sticks it in his mouth instead of his ear. That's how excited they were. And the pilot pulls it. He pulls the hose out of the bombardier's mouth. I thought he was going to lose all those teeth. Well, finally, they got the bombs released, and the pilot somehow got I guess he must have got some oxygen from the bombardier's thing to plug into his bottle, so he had something to go back up to the flight deck with. He finally got up on the flight deck. And then, so when we flew back to Marshfield, and we're getting ready to prepare for landing, and of course they were bringing everybody in from the extremities of the plane, and I'm on the flight deck, and I'm in a well that's just forward of the bomb bay, and I'm watching the guys come through one at a time, and then our tail gunner is walking through the bomb bay, and the bomb bay catwalk was about that wide, and then the bombs were on racks that came up that way.
Okay.
And so he's walking, he's about halfway across this, on the catwalk, halfway across the bomb bay. He's right in the middle of the bomb bay. And the pilot orders the co-pilot to put the flaps down. Well, it's an innocuous command. That's the thing you do. So the co-pilot put the flaps down. It's hydraulically operated. And instead of the flaps going down, the bomb bay doors opened up. And this kid, the tail gunner, is in the middle of the bomb bay. And the doors opened up on him. And I looked at him, and you could see the bloodline drop. He turned white, just like a thermometer.
Yeah.
And I went back, I yelled up to them, I said, put the flap handle back on again, don't argue with me. and so they did, and the bomb bay doors closed. And so they had to land the airplane using a manual crank of some sort that they had to lower the flaps.
Somebody had hooked up the lines wrong.
No, they were right when we took off. When they got down, they found out that all this fighting with the bomb release handle, which was in the hydraulic system, had screwed up the passages of the hydraulic fluid. So they went to the wrong place.
Oh.
And that's why the wrong thing happened, and they thought that they were dropping the flaps.
Was this the same pilot that the
Same
original co-pilot didn't like?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that wasn't really his fault.
Wasn't his problem. I was just wondering if it was
It
still
was,
the
I guess,
same.
that the man handled it at the bomb release handle,
Yeah.
but there were those things that were not his fault. They were the fault of the airplanes being war-weary.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that was our introduction to overseas training. And you might say it was all downhill from there, but it wasn't.
Well, let's pause for
Okay.
a moment here. I need to change this tape here, so we'll just take a second to do that, and then we can continue. Oh, come on, open up. Mechanical devices. Okay. Now we're back in action here. And there we go. Centered. Okay, we're on. Go ahead.
Well, from when we finished our training in Marshfield, our overseas training, we were sent up to Hamilton Field near San Francisco. And from there, we were flown to across the Pacific, landing first in Hawaii, and then Guadalcanal. No, I guess it was Christmas Island, then Guadalcanal, and then to our destination. And we were given sealed orders before we took off, with the instruction that we couldn't open those orders until we were in the air for an hour.
Hmm.
And when we did open those orders, we thought they were in code, because they had the destination as a, and it was spelled NADZAB. So we thought that was code NADZAB, New Guinea. And well, so we weren't really too sure where we were going, but it probably was someplace in New Guinea. And but it was a place. It was a place called NADZAB. There wasn't much of anything there except this Air Force reception center, a bunch of tents.
So this is out in the middle of the Pacific?
This is on the island of New Guinea,
Oh,
which
okay.
is
All right. Yeah.
well, there was an instance on Guadalcanal, though, and I might bring that up. They had given us breakfast or something there, and then we went out and looked around, and I saw this native out there in the field with a big machete, and he was clearing weeds alongside the runway. And I could see he looked like well, had a ring in his nose.
Oh.
And he had big bushy hair, and he looked like one of these wild guys out of the National Geographic magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And so a couple of us walked out there. Here we were pressed khakis, you know,
Yeah.
straight from the States and all. And this guy out there was his loincloth and his bone in his nose and I don't know what else. And it was kind of fascinating. So, but I didn't want to get too close to him. He had his machete, and
Right.
we took off. Anyway, I got to this place, NADZAB, New Guinea, and they assigned us to one of these tents, and we found out that this was really the best living that we would encounter the whole time we were out there, because
Wow.
the tent had a wooden floor in it. That
Ah.
was really first class. And however, we were warned to use the mosquito repellent and then sleep with a mosquito net at night and all. And it wasn't more than 2 weeks. Several of the guys came down with malaria.
Mm.
And as we said earlier, this was the place where later on I was sent back to Loran School as long-range aid to navigation equipment, which ultimately made its way to the Pacific. And that was the same place that had set up a Loran School there. And that was a place where I had that premonition as I was walking across this grassy field. I saw this vision of this best friend of mine. And that was the exact time that he was captured over in France by the Germans. He was in the infantry. But anyway, the first place we finally got our assignment orders. And NADZAB was more or less a collection place where the guys would go before they were assigned to a permanent organization. And it had been used earlier on as the air base for attacking the island of Rabaul, which was a big Japanese stronghold in the South Pacific. And but they still had some B-24s, their old ones, that they weren't using anymore. And they thought they would send us on a mission to Rabaul also. By that time, there was no opposition from there. But the plane we were assigned to had an Australian ground crew, and our pilot got in the plane and tried to rev up the engines. Could never get them up to speed. And the long and short of it, there wasn't enough thrust in those engines to get the plane out of the parking spot.
No.
So we didn't go.
Oh, hell. Pretty bad.
But anyway, we were got our assignment orders, and we were assigned to the 5th Bomb Group, 394th Squadron of the 13th Air Force, which was called the Jungle Air Force at that time. Today it would be called the Rainforest Air Force, I guess. But in any case, they were located on the island of Noomfoor, Noemfwoor, I think was how you spell it. And I think it was named after a Dutchman named Peter Noomfoor. I don't know what his claim to fame was. Might have been a seaman of some sort. The island was 7 miles long and 2.5 miles wide. And that was it. And it had what they called a first growth jungle. And that meant it was a light, thinly populated, tree populated jungle. It wasn't this heavy jungle. And one of the things that we liked to do there was to swim in the river. There was one river that ran across the island. And the best time to swim was in the morning, because in the afternoon the tide would come in and all the debris from the ocean got into the river and it was dirty. But in the morning it was nice. And one morning, Bombardier and I, each of us had one of these yellow one-man life rafts. And it was very calm, and the sun was out, it was hot, and this river was calm. So we stripped down, and we each were lying in our one-man life rafts and sleeping. And all of a sudden, after we were sleeping for about 15, 20 minutes, we heard all this jabbering. We woke up, we looked around, and there were all these oriental faces in the water, smiling at us. Guys, all guys, smiling at us. And I'm sitting there bare-assed, and he's bare-assed. No weapons of any kind. I said, if I have to fight these guys with my hands, I'll have to do it. And they were all smiling, and I looked up on the shore, and there's this GI with a carbine in his hand, and he was guarding these guys, and they turned out to be what they used to call Formosans. They're now Taiwanese. And they had been taken there by the Japanese as slave laborers.
Oh, okay.
And so that's what, but we had kind of a scare out of that.
The Japanese were gone, so they
Yeah.
were still left
Yeah,
over.
they were still there.
Yeah.
Anyway, it came time for our first mission. And it was a routine that we would go to the briefing tent the night before the mission. And we had really a great guy as a commanding officer, Colonel Musgrave. And he made light of our experience we would have the next day. He said, we're going to go after the Japanese fleet in B-24s.
Wow.
And he said, what we're going to do is we're going to send out 4 B-24s that are equipped with radar. And they called them the snooper planes. We had only 4 planes that had radar in them. And they would send them out about an hour before we were to take off. And they would search and try to find the Japanese fleet, which was retreating from the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Leyte was in the Philippines, the central Philippines. And in that battle, the American Army landed on the island of Leyte, and they were guarded from the sea by some small light carriers that were used as support carriers for landing forces. They weren't the real big aircraft carriers. And some smaller ships and some obsolete battleships. And that was all that protection they had, except for our big aircraft carriers. Apparently, the commander of the aircraft carrier fleet, Admiral Bull Halsey, got word that there were 4 Japanese aircraft carriers heading from Japan towards the Philippines. And so he then decided to intercept those 4 aircraft carriers. Because the Japanese, so he went after them. He went after in the direction of those 4 aircraft carriers. In the meantime, in the absence of our aircraft carrier cover, the main Japanese fleet, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, whatever else, steamed into the area of Leyte Gulf. And they attacked all these small ships and flimsy aircraft, landing support carriers, and shot up a lot of them and threatened to annihilate really the landing force. But it was heroically defended by Navy pilots from these little carriers and the small boats. And so the Japanese were delayed in fulfilling their mission. They were shooting up the American ships and all. But the commander of the Japanese fleet, I don't remember his name, but he was worried. He didn't know where the American aircraft carriers were, and he had no air cover. So he broke off the attack and retreated back towards northern Borneo, Brunei Bay. And that's when we got the call to go after the fleet as it was traveling from the Philippines towards Borneo.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember getting into the plane in the morning. At the briefing the night before, Colonel Musgrave made light of all this. He said, "You guys are really lucky." He said, "We're going to send these planes out. You're going to get a lot of combat hours, and we'll probably not find anything." And so we kind of, well, if that's it, that's it. But anyway, the next morning, I got in the plane. We got in through the bomb bay, and I see these about 8-foot long bombs with big armor-piercing noses on, hard steel noses. They look kind of ferocious. I don't know how many bombs we had, either 4 or 6 of them in our bomb bay. And then the routine that day was for the radio operators to stay on the radio and wait for the coded signal that would identify the coordinates of where the super planes would find the Japanese fleet.
Mm-hmm.
And it was their obligation to stay on the radio, even after they got that message, to hang on for any other messages. And so the navigators were told that they would have to go back and man the waist guns in the waist of the plane in place of the radio operator, who normally did it. So finally the radio operator jumped up, and he got the signal, and it gave me the coordinates. I figured out the ETA, estimated time of arrival, to that location. I told the pilots. And then I figured out we had about a half an hour before we got there. So I was bringing all my stuff towards the rear, and I left my chest pack parachute hanging on the hook and next to my table up on the flight deck. And I'm bringing all this stuff, and I put it on the floor finally on the waist of the plane. And all of a sudden there's a big explosion off to the side of us. The plane rolls around, and I look out the window, and this is all this purple flak.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I look at my watch, I said, we got another 15 minutes yet. And I look out, and there are 2 ships down there. One larger than the other one. And the small one's the one that's shooting at us. So the idea was that we'd all get in formation, and we'd fly in formation over the ships to pick out one of them, and they picked out the big one. We'd go after the bigger of the 2 ships. And all the bombardiers would drop on the lead bombardier. As soon as they saw the lead bombs fall, they would release the bombs from their plane. And we'd set up a pattern, and hopefully one of those bombs would hit one of the ships. Well, the Japanese captain, he was just as smart as we were, or just as dumb, I don't know which. And he waited until he saw the bombs start to come out of the bomb bays. He swerved to the left. And our pilot and the plane behind us, who was following us, and it was a 6-plane formation, 3 and 3. And we were this was the lead plane, we were here, there was another plane over here, and there were 3 more here, and the one plane was behind us. And he was flying kind of sloppy formation, the rest of the formation here, and we were out here too far. And the other plane behind us is right behind us. And then we dropped the bombs. And then the ship swerved, and it ran right into our bombs. And the navigator's job is to spot the bombs. And I'm looking out the well through the bomb bay, and the first one hits right in the center of the deck, about a third of the way
Of a
back.
carrier?
Of the ship down there. It turned out to be a cruiser,
Okay.
a light cruiser. And the next bomb hits a little further back, right down the center of the deck. And then one of the bombs from the plane behind us lands on the aft part of the deck, right down the
Dead
center.
center.
Boom, 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 and then I saw different color smoke coming off, brown smoke, green smoke, and so on. And I reported that when I got back. And we saw that the ship was listing when we left. And so I reported all of this. And it was reported later that the ship sunk.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that was my first mission.
Wow. Yeah.
And I never did get back. I didn't during the action. I had no parachute. It was up in front. That was a great feeling. Anyway, on other flights, I'll just summarize those briefly. The longest flight we had was from Samar Island in the central Philippines to Kuching, Borneo, which is on the south coast of Borneo. And that flight took just under 15 hours.
Wow.
And we had to not take some bombs, and we had an auxiliary gas tank put in the bomb bay,
Okay.
so we could make it there and back. That was the longest. The one mission that we had where we encountered the most flak, that was over Manila in the Philippines. And on that mission, we had rendezvoused at some place in the southern Philippines, off of Mindoro Island. And then we came through some clouds, and as soon as we came through the clouds, we saw ships, American ships, as far as you could see.
Hmm.
And that was the invasion fleet going towards Manila. And we were jumped by several Navy Hellcat fighters.
Oh.
And I could see the Navy pilot's face. He was that close. He's flying pursuit curves on us, and our gunners are tracking him. And
Wrong guy.
nobody fortunately fired a shot.
Good.
Anyway, so we got over Manila, and the flak is all over the place. We had never seen that much flak. And we were most vulnerable, the B-24s were, when we were on the bomb run.
Mm-hmm.
Because the bombardier had control of the plane, and its course was predictable. And so that was a happy day for the anti-aircraft gunners. Well, as soon as the bombs were released, the pilot swerved off to the left, and I looked out the window, and had we continued about another 2 or 3 seconds, we would have been right in the middle of a carpet of flak, which was about 10 yards square.
Hmm.
Keep the hair down. Anyway, so that was the most flak, and we got okay. Got out of it okay. And another time, we were on a mission to the central Philippines, and we bombed successfully. Mostly we bombed airfields, the runways, so that it denied the enemy from using the airfields. But we just passed over the very few small islands of the very southern part of the Philippine chain, and I took a fix. I noted the time and where we were relative to that extra large rock in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured out our ETA. Oh, and we had hit this enormous cloud bank, thunderheads, and we were buffeted up and down and up and down, sometimes as much as 1,000 feet at a time. And I looked out and I was wondering how the wings stayed on the airplane. And I couldn't see anything beyond the wingtips. And this went on for 4 hours. And I'm supposed to navigate through this.
Typhoon or
Huh?
a typhoon or just a storm?
No, it's just a big storm front.
Hmm.
And it went on for miles.
Wow.
And it was all thunderheads. And we were
Yeah.
flying in the middle of it. And the rain was coming in through the upper turret. And it was getting everybody wet inside on the flight deck. And the rain was splattering up against the front window, and everybody's shivering. And I'm up there trying to read meters, which are pinning at both ends, like this. And I gave up on writing anything or reading anything. And I was standing there with my flak helmet in one hand, puking in it, while I was trying to navigate, watching these pins going like this on the instruments. And what I would do is I would, in my mind, average approximately how much that needle was pinned for how long to what direction. And then I would, after about 10 minutes of that, I would correct the pilot and fly in the opposite direction for X amount of minutes to compensate. And I did this for 4 hours. And I had figured, as I said, I had figured out my ETA back to the base. But what I told the pilot was, we're going to get there 3 minutes after the one that I calculated. I gave him a later ETA. Well, we're plowing along, and we're getting closer and closer to where we're going to hit my calculated ETA. And I still couldn't see anything. So I figured out a search pattern, expanded square search pattern in my mind as to what we would do if we didn't hit our, we didn't see anything by the time we got to the ETA. We had to go down on the deck and make this expanded search pattern looking for an island. And I was really sweating. Sweating and puking and shivering all at the same time. And just as we hit my calculated ETA, the heavens opened. And I looked down, and straight ahead is our airfield, and we're right in line with the runway. I said to myself, this is providential. This is kind of a stronger hand. That's when I really got religion, you asked about earlier. And when we got to the 3 minute later ETA, we were right over the runway.
My goodness.
And then we went around, and we came back and we landed. That was quite an experience too.
Wow, yeah.
And the most bizarre things that happened on our flights, I think, were one time we were on a mission going up towards Luzon to bomb something near Manila, probably an airfield. And we passed over Mindoro Island, which was the big island just south of Luzon. And the Americans had recaptured Mindoro. And they were using the airfield down there. And I looked down, and I see this airfield down there, and I see these Japanese planes strafing the airfield. And I'm watching this air attack from higher up.
Yeah.
But we still had to go to our target, so we couldn't do anything about it. And I'm watching they're strafing all the positions on that airfield. Well, that was kind of weird, seeing an air attack from up high.
Yeah.
Another time, we were flying back from a mission, probably in the central Philippines or thereabout. We were in the central Philippines, when all of a sudden, everybody's relaxed. We were flying home, the bombs had been dropped and everything. The sky was clear. All of a sudden, a flight of about 6 or 8 2-engine Japanese Betty bombers crossed in front of us. And it all happened so fast that nobody fired a shot. Nobody fired a shot. Not the Japanese, not us.
Oh, everybody's going home.
Everybody's going home. But it turned out apparently that the P-38s from the 13th Air Force must have shot down several of those bombers, because after we had landed, a couple of the P-38s came over our airfield and did a victory roll. And it was a snap roll at low altitude over the field. So they must have gotten at least two of them.
Caught up with them.
And then the third most bizarre thing that happened on the flights was one time I forgot where we were going. I think it was someplace in Borneo. And it was our routine that about an hour after we took off, the gunners would go back to their positions and check the guns. Well, they did this, and then all of a sudden we started getting calls on the intercom from the gunners. One gunner would call, he says, I only got 1 round of ammunition. And another guy calls him, hey, there's only 2 rounds of ammunition here. Another guy says, I don't have any ammunition. And then, so the pilots got to talking to the other pilots in the flight. Nobody had any ammunition.
Oh my gosh.
And we didn't know what the hell happened. This had never happened before. Well, we went to the target, dropped our bombs, and we're coming back in kind of loose formation. And everybody's kind of antsy because there's no ammunition in any of the planes. There's a few rounds at most. And we see a Japanese Zero fighter plane in the distance, in the horizon. And so the orders came, everybody get into close formation, and all the gunners wave their guns around like mad. Wave the guns around. Well, this must have scared that Japanese pilot, who could have become the ace of the Japanese Air Force, as long as his ammunition held out, because he had no opposition. But it must have scared him away, and he didn't attack. When we got back, by that time we had gotten a new commanding officer, and this guy was, as we used to call him, brown noser, from the States. And he made us sing the Air Force song after the briefings the night before. And we thought this was really the pits, the pits. And he had ordered all the ammunition off the planes so that he could establish a record for saving fuel.
Yeah.
Well, this guy should have been court-martialed at the least, and removed from his position and reduced in rank, I'm sure. But nothing apparently happened. And the pilots yelled at him when they got back. All the pilots ganged up on him. What the heck are you doing? So they argued back and forth, and he finally relented to putting half the ammunition back in the planes. So we had to fly the rest of the missions with half the ammunition. But fortunately, we didn't have too many more missions to go at that time. But there was another bizarre thing that happened, and it didn't happen to us or me, except to get it from the guy that it happened to. Well, we were sent down to Australia for rest leave, and when we were, that was from the island of Morotai. We were sent to Australia, and then after our rest leave, we were sent up to the Philippines, where our outfit had moved to Samar Island in the central Philippines. And when we landed there, they said, well, you can have this tent. It's already up. The crew was lost, and the tent's available if you don't mind using it. So we weren't superstitious, so we said, yeah, it's up already, we'll take it. We got to the tent, and there's one guy in it. He was the bombardier from that crew that had lived in the tent. And he told us the story. I'm standing next to him, and he's shaking. He couldn't stand still. It was like he was dancing on his toes, and his arms, hands were shaking. He said they were on a mission to Mindanao Island, the southern Philippines. And they were flying in a 6-plane formation, where the three planes in front were here, and the three planes to the rear were at a slightly lower altitude and following the planes in front. Well, apparently when they got over the target, the front plane slowed down a little bit, and the lower plane slid underneath the upper planes, and the bombs were let go. And one of these bombs landed on this guy's plane, hit the flight deck, blew everything apart. And he found himself, the nose turret blew out, and everything blew out. He found himself falling down on a piece of flooring and one rib of the fuselage. And on that rib was a hook with his chest parachute. And he's on this thing, and fortunately he wasn't tumbling, and he's trying to reach up to grab that parachute. He finally got it, snapped it on his harness, pulled the ripcord, parachute opened, and almost immediately afterwards his feet hit the water.
Oh my
It was
God.
in the ocean.
This is
south
like
of Mindanao.
MacGyver.
Yeah, he was saved by that. And they sent him home. They sent him home after that. He wasn't worth anything after that, because
Wow.
and that was a true story, because it was written up again in an Air Force magazine later on. I thought maybe I had the magazine, but I didn't have it.
Amazing.
Now, so those were the bizarre things that happened to us. Now later on, if I might have those props that I brought in here.
The other fellow.
Give me,
Rob
give me
took 'em
the
away.
small book
He-
first.
he took it.
Yeah. Many years later, after the war, I went to a used book fair, and I saw this book, which is entitled The Battle of Lady Gulf by Adrian Stewart, and I think it was written about 1979 or thereabouts. 1977, I think. In any case, I read the book, and I said, I wonder if he said anything about what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally came across it. And it's,
This is the ship that you blew
yeah,
up on your
right,
First
right.
Nation.
This is on that light cruiser that we sunk.
Mm-hmm.
And what he said is, finally, as if the Japanese had not suffered enough at the hands of the American Navy, the American Army Air Force, somewhat belatedly, also entered the fight. At about 1000 hours on the 26th, a strong force of 44 B-24 Liberators and B-25 Mitchells bombers attacked light cruiser Abukama and destroyer Kasumi. Well, that wasn't accurate. Actually, the bulk of our planes and the B-25s did actually attack the main Japanese force,
Okay.
the Japanese naval
Yeah.
force. We had stumbled on these two ships, and so we didn't attack the main force, but the rest of the planes did. That's where they went.
Okay.
But there were just, I think, 6 of us,
Mm-hmm.
and we were the ones that attacked this cruiser.
Okay.
And he goes on and says they attacked the light cruiser Abukama and destroyer Kazami off the southwest of Negros Island in the Philippines. The destroyer was not hurt, but the luckless light cruiser had been too badly damaged by the earlier hit from PT 137 to make more than 9 knots. Neither could she maneuver properly. In consequence, the bombers made several hits on her, starting fires which spread until finally detonated her torpedoes. The resulting explosion doomed the Abukama. She sank at 12:42. Well,
Now you know what you hit.
hand me that picture, that photograph there, if you
But
will.
that, the other fellow took them
Might be in
away.
there.
No, no picture.
The other fellow.
Here. You wanna?
Can you see that?
It's not in here. it's just the,
Put some
that
away to
stuff.
photograph them, dear.
Yeah, why don't you open the door and,
Okay.
see if he's,
Sure, yeah,
he
it's
should have been
something
done
in
with
there.
that.
Well, in any case, so finally, I learned the name of the ship.
Mhm.
It was the Abukama. And then, several years later, I went to another book fair and I came across this book.
Yes,
It's called At Dawn We Slept,
right,
The Untold Story of Pearl Harbor by Gordon W. Prang. And there were 4 references to the Abukama.
is that right?
It is.
Okay.
And it turned out that the Abukama was not only the lead ship in the Japanese fleet, in the Japanese flotilla, but it was also the flagship. It was also the flagship. I'll have those also. It was also the flagship of that Japanese flotilla that attacked Pearl Harbor almost 3 years earlier.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And this is a picture of the Abukama.
Okay, let's get that closer
can
so
see-
we can see.
On the picture,
Hold it
the
up
smoke
there.
coming from the Abukama, and then the bomb hits that missed and killed fish in the water.
Okay.
That's what we used to call when we missed a target on the ocean, we were killing fish.
Right, yeah.
That, you can see the smoke coming out of the Abukama, which
Yeah.
is right here.
Right, okay.
And you can see the path of his swerve to the left.
Mm-hmm.
And so apparently his maneuverability wasn't all that damaged. He may not have been able to go too fast, but he sure could maneuver.
Yeah.
And had we been flying tighter formation, he would have missed all the bombs.
Okay. Well, that was quite a revelation there. That,
So I guess you might add, what really were my conclusions from all of this experience, and there were several things that resulted from it. I think like anybody who has seen any combat, although you see the tragedy of war, the destruction and the waste of both human lives and property, it does give you an emotional high.
yeah.
It really gives you an emotional high. It's the emotional pinnacle of your life. You don't forget it. And everything is measured as it was for World War II veterans. Things that happened before the war and things that happened after the war.
Yeah.
That was it. That was one thing. The other thing that I was left with is that symbolic site that I had in Fresno in basic training. Being quarantined to base, not allowed to leave, sitting in my green jail suit,
Mm-hmm.
and looking at that 9-foot-high chain link fence with a barbed wire facing inward. Symbolically, that told me something. And it told me that freedom is worth fighting for. Freedom is worth it.
Yeah.
That's it.
So, well, how did your service conclude then? That
Well,
you kept on doing missions till the end of the war, and
yeah, as it turned out, that on that long flight that I told you about going to Kuching, Borneo, before the flight, before we got into the airplane, it was dark. It was real early in the morning. It was dark out. and I slipped and fell down a hill on the side of the runway. And my foot got caught in under a cut coconut log, which was, there was a bunch of cut logs there, and it stretched my knee. And I couldn't pick the leg up. I had to go like this to pick it up. But I didn't want all the guys to lose all those going home points that we would get from the mission, because that was a long mission. And we got combat hour credit for all the hours we were in on these flights. So I flew the mission, and I remember that the flight surgeon, before we took off, he felt that the guys were going to get pretty tired, so he gave us Benzedrine tablets to take. Tablets were, yeah, I think they were tablets. So that on the way back, it would wake us up and we wouldn't fall asleep. Well, when I got down, I reported to the flight surgeon. He looked at the knee, he gave me some crutches, and he gave me sleeping pills. And I went back to my tent on the crutches, and I was reading my mail. I picked up some mail. And I'm standing next to my cot. And I fell asleep standing up. And I fell into the cot. And I wasn't awake enough to even pull down the mosquito net that night. And because the sleeping pill took over and Benzedrine wore off and I was off.
Nice
But
sleep.
as a result of that, I was grounded for about a month. So in order for me to make enough combat hours, I was able to fly a few more flights with my crew to rejoin them. And then they went home. But then I had to fly with other crews until I had accumulated enough hours. And so I was sent back, I think it was in August. I forgot exactly, it was late summer. And I remember I was on a train going towards Chicago, home. And I remember there were two other GIs on this train. It wasn't a troop train, regular train. And they looked out, and one guy said to the other one, he says, "Even the weeds look good." And but I picked up a newspaper, and in this newspaper was a story about a super bomb. It turned out to be the atomic bomb. And they had big articles in the Chicago papers about describing what this bomb was all about.
This
So it
was
about
before they dropped it?
After they dropped it.
Okay.
After they dropped it. And it had happened just as I was going home.
Wow.
So, but I finally, I had to report to, after I had a short leave at home, I had to report to Patterson Field in Ohio to get discharged. And there were so many guys getting discharged that they were swamped. And so all I did was play basketball for a while, every day in the gym. I got pretty good at it after a while. But anyway, they couldn't process us there, so they sent us the Chicagoans anyway. They sent us to Fort Sheridan in Chicago, and that's where I was discharged.
Okay.
And,
So then what?
pardon me?
Then what happened?
Oh, then what happened?
Go back to school, or?
Not immediately, because it was between semesters, or it was in the middle of a semester, and I couldn't get in. And so I went to work in a department store. That was kind of fun. A lot of good-looking girls there. So I had a lot of fun. And so finally, I wanted to get into Illinois Institute of Technology, which is on the south side of Chicago, the engineering school. It used to be called Armor Tech. The fellow that started the meat packing company, Armor Meat Packing Company, and he started this engineering school. But later on became known as Illinois Institute of Technology. And I applied there, but they said, we got so many of our students coming back, we can't let you in.
Hmm.
Why don't you go back to where you were going to school before you got into service? And maybe there'll be an opening. So I went back to Wright College and took some more courses there, pre-engineering courses, and kept trying to get into Illinois Tech. And they finally said, the only way you can get in is if you go to night school first and take a course or two at night school and then transfer to the day school.
Mm-hmm.
So I was taking courses at Wright College in the morning, riding the elevated and buses through Illinois Tech for the night school, and doing my homework on the transportation. And so finally, I finished the night courses, and they finally let me into the day school, electrical engineering school. And so about two or two and a half years later, I graduated with an engineering degree in Wwii. And then I went to work in a capacitor manufacturing company in Chicago. We made capacitors of different types and electronic filters.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, well, while I was still there, I went to a dance one night, and I met a young lady.
Mm.
She's sitting over there. And we got married, and I had sent information out requesting interviews, and one of them was sent to Lear Incorporated in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And so we were on our honeymoon to Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And the first stop was in Grand Rapids, and I took this interview. And I left her in the car, parked out on the street somewhere, and she didn't know how to drive.
Uh-oh.
And this interview took so long that the parking place where she was parked, they said no parking after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And she didn't know what to do because she couldn't drive the car. And a policeman comes along. No, I guess it was a pedestrian, wasn't it? The pedestrian comes along. She says, I got to move the car and I don't know how to drive. So she asked this guy to move the car for her. She'd never do that today.
No.
Anyway, so he moved it into an alley that was off the street. And finally, my interview was over, and it was successful. And a little later on, we got the letter with the offer in it.
So you're working with Mr. Lear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bill Lear was the big weenie at that time at Lear
Mhm.
Incorporated. He started the company.
Okay.
And he was quite a colorful character.
Yes, he was.
Very colorful. And we had quite an organization, and we had a lot of fun. We did a lot of work, and mostly we made autopilots and flight control equipment and instruments. And
So did you get to put your navigation experience to work in making new instruments?
Not the navigation per se, but at least I had the understanding of what the instruments were for and how they functioned.
Yeah.
I worked on things called the yaw damper system, which was
Mhm.
a system that was used on the Grumman F-11F fighter plane, a Navy fighter plane, and it gave them control this way,
Right.
from yaw,
Yep.
excessive yaw. And I worked a little on autopilots and this kind of stuff. And, then I was there for 6 years, and then I went to work for the Martin Company in Denver. And this was on the Titan missile program, where we built the Titan missile,
Mhm.
intercontinental ballistic missile, liquid fuel.
So you were doing the guidance system on that?
I should have been, but I was in another department.
Oh, okay.
I should have said, hey, I don't want the job you gave me, I want to go to the other, but I didn't.
Hmm.
I was stuck in something called operational engineering, which is supposed to plan out all the things that everybody was supposed to do, you know, how the programs were to be functioning, all the interfacing events and so on. But that, I never did like that. It was, I felt my engineering career drifting away from
Right.
this. And finally I left there, and I went to work for Philco, Western Development Labs in Palo Alto, California.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of like a fish out of water there because they did mostly radio frequency stuff and satellite tracking and satellite communications, and but I did the best I could.
Mhm.
But I figured I'm out of water, so I got another job back in Michigan with LTV, Ling Tempco Vought, and they had a missile contract for the Lance missile, an Army surface-to-surface missile. And I got the job of heading up the development of the guidance system on that.
Okay.
And we successfully developed the guidance system and the missile and its propulsion system. And the plan was to have a number of flights without the guidance system, just to check the propulsion system and get it operating right, and then finally put in the guidance system and check that out.
Mm-hmm.
But we had progressed so well on our testing and development of the guidance system that we said, hey, I said, we're ready to go on that first flight. And we did. We put the guidance system in the very first flight of the Lance missile, and we hit the target the first time out.
Wow.
And so
That's an achievement.
so we had a big party that night.
I can
It was at
imagine.
White Sands
Mm-hmm.
range, and everybody got pots. But it was a great celebration, a
Great.
great relief.
Okay.
And from there, I went to, from LTV, I went to Astronautics Corporation of America, which is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I got the job as chief engineer there. And we made aircraft instruments and displays primarily.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there for about 6 years. And then I started my own business making high voltage power supplies to be used for CRT displays for aircraft instruments that had CRT readouts. And I managed to get one, I was a subcontractor to a subcontractor.
Mm.
And my power supplies got on the B-1 bomber.
Oh, boy.
But then we had a change of administrations in Washington, and Jimmy Carter became president, and he canceled the B-1 bomber, and my business went down the tubes.
Oh.
So that's the long and short of it.
So did you go back to work or just retire after that?
No,
or?
After I closed the business down, I went to work for Hughes in Carlsbad, California, in their industrial products division, and I did the military stuff that they didn't want to do. They were all doing industrial
Mhm.
stuff, and so they gave me the stuff they didn't want to do. And I was pretty advanced in age at the time, and I was lucky to get the job. And so I was there for how long? About 7 years, I think, 7 or 8 years, and then I retired
Mm-hmm.
when I was 65.
Okay. Well, it sounds like a very interesting career that you had
Yeah,
in
yeah.
a lot of different places, doing a lot of different things.
Yeah, when I was really, I felt in my own mind I was not cut out for that kind of stuff. I was really cut out to be a beachcomber.
Oh, okay.
That's
So
what I
you-
would really
you
have liked
moved
to
to the
lounge
beach?
out on a beach somewhere and look at the palm trees and
So-
enjoyed life.
Well, you were working in Carlsbad, so that's on the beach. Did you live there, or?
We lived, well, first of all, when I got the job, we lived in San Diego, in a condo in Mission Valley.
Okay.
And then I got the job, and I worked up there for a couple of years, and it got me quite a drag to go from San Diego all the way up to Carlsbad and back at night. It's always driving in the wintertime in the dark. And I said to Rita, my wife, I said, we got to move further, closer to the job. So we moved up halfway to Solana Beach. But we kept the condo and we rented it out, the one in Mission Valley. And we stayed up there in Solana Beach for about 15 years. And then when my son finally got married, he was 46 years old. We decided, well, maybe he'll have a family, and we have some family life for a change. So we sold our house in Solana Beach and moved up to Orange County to Mission Viejo, and for 3 years. And then we said, hey, it's too hard to take care of that condo in San Diego at this distance. And this condo we had bought up there, it wasn't working out for us. So we sold that, and we told my son, we got to go back and sell the one in San Diego, and then we'll move back. Well, we moved back to San Diego, and I had to have a couple of minor operations. And that delayed us in putting the place up for sale. We want to stay in it for 2 years and then sell it. Well, we stayed in it 3 years, tried to put it up, and then the real estate market went down the tubes.
So you're still there?
So that's where we're living right now.
Okay. Well,
That's it.
sounds like a good place.
We liked it. We always did that, like that little condo.
So let's see, you mentioned you have a son. Did you have any other children, or?
No, we have one son, and he operates a small business in Orange County. He's now in Costa Mesa, and he makes electronic filters.
Taught him how to do that. Huh?
Instrumentation filters, and they're used primarily in instrumentation labs. And what they do is they cut out high frequency feedback into the frequency range of the honest to goodness test data. And they're called anti-aliasing filters. And basically what they do is they cut out the clock frequency of the sampling clock, because these are used in test situations where they have a number of different things they're testing, and they clock and they sequence the testing samples, and so they're running at a certain clock speed, and you don't want that clock frequency to get back into your data, and these filters prevent that from happening. And they're also used in other applications. The automobile companies use them in their test labs to test their automobiles. And the Navy uses a lot of them. In fact, they're in the Navy submarines. And he gets calls every now and again. He says, "Hey, send us the filters, because we can't get the submarine out. We can't leave on our submarine trip until we get those filters." That kind of thing.
So I guess he's an electronic engineer then.
Well, he started to be into pre-med.
Oh.
That's where he started in college. He went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And he couldn't get into med school. And then he tried to get into dental school, and he couldn't do that either. So he decided to go for a master's degree, and he took a master's degree in biomedical engineering. And it was then that he learned how to program computers and that. And then he worked for a couple of years for companies that made biomedical equipment. But then he decided to go in for himself and started his own business, and started out with software first, and then ultimately with software and hardware, and now he does both.
Great. Sounds like a good business.
Well, it's a struggle. It's a struggle.
Yeah, well,
But
any business is that way, I guess.
but he does business all over the world. And for a while there, when our economy was really on the bottom, most of his business was coming from Europe.
Hmm. Okay. Well, we're just about out of tape here, so
Okay.
I would like to thank you for coming in and having this conversation with us today, and I want to thank you for your service to the country.
Oh, thank
So,
you. It's been
yeah.
my pleasure. I never thought I'd get interviewed for any of this.
Well, you did a great job. It really
Thank you.
is a good interview, and I think we learned a lot, so thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll turn it off. So, wow, that was very good, very interesting.
I never intended to talk that
It was
long.
very good, dear. I commend you.
Yeah, you made, some
I found
people
it-
don't,
I found it interesting.
great job
Yeah,
of explaining what was going on.
I think. It really,
Let's see, I gotta shut this other one off here. If
we thank you too for being the person who
Well,
was making this happen too.
I